up in the directories as to what this file means. So this whole you know, process of walking through the directory tree is something that's not exposed to system call level, because you just say open and the kernel basically figures out what's the directory tree, finds the ultimate file that you're trying to refer to, and just opens it, right? So some of these finer grained internal operations you may not be able to see, and this can have an impact on the kinds of policies that you can enforce. But the most important one is the race condition that we talked about, okay? Because many times you find yourself wanting to enforce a policy based on the resource name, right? So the resource name, you might want to say, for instance, this program can only access files in the /tmp directory, right? So this is a very meaningful sort of sandboxing policy. But in order to do that, you have to perform a path name based check, and we have already seen that these types of path name based checks are prone to race conditions. So this makes it a little bit tricky to enforce policies based on system calls. And in fact, what you will find is that there are certain system call sandboxing mechanisms available in Linux. There is this thing called seccomp, right, which is used for limiting this set of system calls that a process can access. And what they decided was that okay, you simply cannot resolve things like path names in that interface, because this operation is inherently prone to race conditions. So I'm not even going to allow you to use this information in your conditions. And well, that's a design decision that they made, which might make in a certain context. But if your goal is to limit access to some piece of untrusted code, this is not going to work, because pretty much everything that you want to enforce on untrusted code, right, is going to be based on what resources it accesses, right? You may be interested in saying, okay, it shouldn't access certain system calls, but the reality is that most system calls that have the potential to cause damage will require privilege process, or rather a process with root privilege, and hopefully you're not trying to run an untrusted piece of code with root privilege, right? Because if you do that, then you're probably sunk. So if you don't run it with root privilege, then the process is probably not going to be able to do too much damage by using obscure system calls, but the main threat is going to be that it is going to, for instance, say, remove the files from your home directory or encrypt them, right? So things like that. And if you want to stop those types of activities, right, like what ransomware might do, what you need is a policy that restricts access based on the file names that it accesses. But if you have a mechanism that simply doesn't allow you to access the file names, well, you can't do that. So even though race conditions are a problem, what you need to take away from that is that one needs to be careful in designing these sorts of policies that make use of file names, and rather than simply saying that, okay, I'm not going to enforce those types of policies. So so there are known ways to avoid the race condition, but doing that requires the operating system to be implementation to be changed in some ways. It's not necessarily very complex, but it still is a change, and so and changes don't happen unless the people who are in charge, who are the maintainers of the operating system, are convinced that these types of changes are useful. Okay, so so there are system call policies, and so before I go into let's talk a little bit about so how many? So all of you have. So let me just spend a couple of minutes. So presumably, I presume most of you are comfortably along on the assignment, right? With some definition of comfortable. So